Do you ever wonder what the best way is to practice your chords on the guitar? Well, if that happens to be one of those questions that keeps you up at night, you're definitely going to want to tune in today because I'm going to share with you my favorite practice routine for cleaning up the sound of your chords. Why? You know why. Because you're a guitar player, and this is GuitarAmado. Well, hello, all of my wonderful guitar playing friends out there. Happy Friday, and welcome back to another exciting edition of GuitarAmado, where the goal is always to show you how to think for yourself as a guitarist and a musician so that you can become your own teacher. I'm your humble host, Adam Amado, and I've got brand new episodes coming at you every single Friday. So you might want to click that subscribe button or maybe even hit that notification bell if in fact you do want to stay up to date with the latest content from this channel. Now on with today's lesson, cleaning up the sound of your chords. Now I just want to go through and share my favorite practice routine for this. This has helped me over the years, helped many of my students, and the cool thing about it is it doesn't really matter what level you're at, whether you're a total beginner learning your open chord shapes or you're at an advanced level going through like crazy jazz chords with all those fancy extensions and whatnot. Regardless of where your skills are at, you can use this practice routine to improve the sound of your chords. All right, so what is today's practice routine? Well, it's very simple. You're just going to select any two chords that you know, and just keep in mind, in this case, when I'm talking about chords that you already know, I'm just talking about chords that you have memorized, because this practice routine is going to be way easier and more efficient if you don't have to look back to the chord diagrams every time you switch to the other chord. So like I said, you can use this routine to work on any number of chords, from simple chords to complex chords. But today I'm going to keep things more on the beginner-friendly side, and we're just going to work with two extremely common guitar chords, and that is G major and C major. And those are both in the first position, open string, basic chord shapes. So there's really only two parts to this practice routine. So the first part's nice and easy. Once you pick out your chords, you just want to spend some time. Doesn't have to be a whole lot of time, maybe 30 seconds to a minute. And take that time just to switch back and forth. And you're kind of jogging your memory, warming up your fingers, just getting in the swing of things. So we'll start with the G chord, move to the C chord, back to the G chord. So keep in mind as you're doing this, the focus of today's practice routine has nothing to do with timing, right? Or rhythm or anything. So it really doesn't matter how fast you're transitioning between these chords. You're simply just taking some time to jog your memory of the chord shapes and, get your fingers a little loose. So part two of this practice routine then is where the magic happens. So the whole idea with this part of the practice routine is just to take those same chords and you're going to pluck through each chord one string at a time to identify where the awkward notes are, the notes that we need to fix. It's going to be very important to understand what your options are for cleaning up the sounds of these notes. And it really only comes down to three things: the pressure, the placement, and the angle of your fingers on the fretboard. So in case you haven't heard me talk about this before, let's go ahead and run through it real quick. Now, pressure and placement are very closely related to each other. So first of all, let's talk about placement. So when you're deciding whether or not these awkward sounding notes could be a placement issue, the question that you're asking yourself is, how close is my finger to the fret? So, and remember, the frets are literally the metal pieces that run perpendicular to the strings. So in the case of the G chord, the sixth string note is here in the third fret. So when you're asking yourself about the placement of your finger, how close is it to the fret, we're looking at this fret right here, the third fret. And is your finger right up behind it, or is it back further away from it? So that's typically going to be the first thing that you check when you're cleaning up the sound of your chords. how close is your finger to the fret? Because more often than not, if you have a buzz sounding note, moving your finger closer to the fret is going to clean that sound right up. So how does placement relate directly to pressure then? Pressure refers to how hard you have to press on the string in order to get a clean sounding note. And it's directly related to the placement of your finger, because the closer you are to the fret, the lighter you have to press to get a clean sounding note. And then finally, the angle of your fingers has to do with blocking other strings. Okay, so now that we've identified the three main things that could be causing these awkward notes, what you want to do as you pluck through these strings individually, every time you come across one of those awkward sounding notes, you want to stop and identify what the issue is so that you can clean up the sound of that note. So let's take a look at the C chord now and quickly go through and identify any awkward sounding notes. Now I'm going to purposefully try to mess up a bunch of notes here so we can have a lot to work with. So let's see if I can accurately play this chord terribly. Okay, so right away, I've got a buzzed sound here on the third fret of the fifth string. So first thing I'm going to do is check my placement. Yep, I can get a little closer to the fret. And that worked. Oh, I still heard a tiny buzz, so I'm going to add a slight amount of pressure to that finger as well. Okay, so now we're moving on to the fourth string, and that's kind of muted. So I'm going to check my placement. That's good. Pressure is not changing the mute at all, so it's got to be an angle issue. Yep, I can feel that string, that fourth string, vibrating against my third finger. So I need to make that adjustment, get my finger up away from that fourth string. There we go. Now the next string. Now that's not too bad. It still sounds pretty good, but I can feel that string vibrating against my second finger just a little bit. So just that feeling there, even though the sound wasn't as bad, the fact that I felt that against my finger is going to cause me to make that adjustment and lift my finger up a little bit more. And then the second string, I have a muted sound, so I'm going to check my placement right up against the fret, so that's not it. Maybe just press a little harder. Okay, so that was a pressure issue. And then the first string is muted. Oh, that's got to be an angle issue, right? Because I don't have any fingers on that string. So my first finger, yep, I can feel that string vibrating against that finger. So I'm going to adjust my finger slightly, get it more up on the tip of the finger. Now that we've gone through and fixed all of our notes, you want to go through and double check again. Oh, see that note's buzzing. That's a little buzzy there. So we're going to switch to the G chord and go through the exact same process. Fifth string's a little muted, so what's going on there? Placement's good. Pressure's not making any difference. So yes, it's an angle issue. My second finger, I can feel that string hitting my second finger. So I just make that slight adjustment. Got a clean sounding note. Now on to the fourth string. That's all good. Third string, all good. Second string, muted, kind of buzzy. Okay, let's look at that. Placement is... So here is a perfect example of how you can't always get the proper placement with your finger. So as I'm looking at this second string here, I got my nasty sounding note, I'm thinking, okay, the placement, yeah, I'm a little away from the fret. I could definitely move up closer, but in this case, I can't actually because my fourth finger's in the way. Because those two fingers are in the same fret. So as you get more crowded fingerings going on, this fourth finger is actually pushing my third finger back away from the fret. So the only option I have here to clean up that sound is to press harder. And then the first string, all good. So we made it all the way through. Now let's go back and double check. Oh, now my sixth string is kind of messed up. Okay. Well, I just released some pressure. That's all. So I need to press a little harder. Fifth string is good. Fourth, third, second, and first. Okay. All strings are sounding good. Move back to the C chord and do the same thing. Okay. I get a little buzzy sound on my fourth string. Last time we knew it was an angle issue, so let's maybe check that first this time. And no, I can't feel it hitting my third finger, or it doesn't appear to be touching. So it's probably a placement or a pressure issue. Placement, I'm right up against the fret, so it's got to be pressure. So I press a little harder. There we go. Third string. All good. Second string. And first string. Oh, we're muted. No fingers on that string, so it's most likely an angle issue. Hit it a couple more times. Yep, I can feel that string vibrating against my first finger. So I just make that adjustment, get it out of the way. Go back and double check all the strings again. Clean sounding chord. Now we're going to switch back to the G. But the main idea here is that every time you switch chords, you have to reset your fingers. So chances are you're going to run into some more awkward sounding notes. And every time you switch back and forth between chords, your goal is to get just a little bit faster at making those adjustments to get the clean sound. So when you're first starting out with this practice routine, it's probably going to be very frustrating. It's going to be very slow progress. You're going to have to stop a lot and fix those awkward sounding notes. And like I said, once you fix one note, it might mess up another note that you previously fixed. So you're going to have to go back and double check. And it's just a very tedious and often frustrating process. But the cool thing is, even with one practice session, you should start to feel those results of every time you switch to that new chord, you get a little bit faster each time at making those proper adjustments to clean up your sound. And if you continue to do this practice routine every day over a long stretch of time, you're eventually going to come to a point where those adjustments that you make to clean up your sound just happen automatically, almost on a subconscious level. Because the more you do this, the more you're programming your brain to not only recognize those awkward sounding notes, but instantly know what to do in order to fix the sound. And that, my friend, is where the real power of this practice routine comes in. So I think that's a pretty good place for us to stop today. I'm thinking next week we'll probably continue on with this exact same practice routine, but what we're going to do is flip our focus away from clean sounding chords to more rhythm and timing with your chord transition. And that'll be a perfect example of a concept that I've been teaching for many years now, and that's this idea of two types of practice. So today's practice routine fits in the category of the first type of practice, where it's more on the technical side of things. You know, you're playing through and you're stopping each time you make a mistake, and you're really focusing your attention in on what you need to do to correct that mistake. And the second type of guitar practice that we're going to look at next week with this exact same practice routine is more on the performance side of guitar practice. So thinking in the context of playing with other musicians, you're performing for an audience or something, you do not have time to stop and fix your mistakes. And nobody, regardless of how good they get, plays perfectly. So mistakes are bound to happen in a live performance setting. So when you practice for performance, it's all about letting those mistakes go and just keeping up with the time and the chord changes. So if that sounds interesting to you, you're definitely going to want to tune in next week. But for now, I would love to hear from you about today's practice routine. Did this help you at all? Did any light bulbs go off? Maybe you have some slightly different ideas for practicing your chords that you could share with the rest of us. So feel free to drop me a line in the comments. Let me know if this lesson was helpful for you or not. I will see you in next week's video, and until then, happy practicing, my friends.